With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning on the AgNet News Hour. Coming up later, there's assistance available to help conservation in California citrus. We'll have more on that. Plus, as global economic conditions improve, cotton demand will improve as well. But we start today with a deep dive into issues surrounding the livestock industry. From the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, here's Hunter Ehrman talking with NCBA Executive Director of Government Affairs, Allison Rivera.
Allison, tell us a little bit about your team that you lead here and some of the issues that your team has been watching.
Well, thanks for having me today, Hunter. Again, Allison Rivera, and I lead the A team, which is also known as the Cattle Health and Ag and Food Policy team. Our team encompasses our Chief Veterinarian, Dr. Kathy Simmons, as well. This team stays pretty busy. As I just mentioned, we do cover quite a lot of issues, obviously everything that encompasses cattle health and cattle health policy. But our team also covers things like food safety and traceability. We're always continuing the conversation on dietary guidelines. We also cover things like fake meat, which I know is always a hot button issue and one that our members are always focused on. And then we focus also on labor and immigration, which is, again, yet another hot button issue on our team, and one that you've certainly heard a lot about recently. And we do have policy on protecting the border, and so that is something that we pay close attention to, as well as meeting those labor needs that we know are still out there. And then my favorite is, as most of the listeners may know, is transportation. We spend a lot of time on supply chain issues, keeping an eye on just making sure that cattle are able to move as they need to safely, and that we're keeping an eye on ports and other modes of transportation around the country, and making sure that those transportation needs in rural America are absolutely met.
Well, Allison, we've been tracking the wildfires in Texas and Oklahoma, and it's a reminder of how much devastation those fires can cause. Tell us a little bit about some of the disaster relief resources that are out there for cattle producers.
So absolutely, our thoughts and prayers go out to everybody that has been affected, and we want to be as helpful as possible. I hope that we have pushed out a lot of helpful information, but we want to continue to remind people that there are programs available for situations and disasters such as this. And as you're navigating through these programs, if there are ways that these programs can be improved, please pass those along to our office. If things are going on, we need to know about them so that we can work with USDA. But as you're navigating some of these programs, like the Livestock Indemnity Program, that again covers both cattle that were harmed during the fires, but maybe didn't perish, as well as those that did. We want to make sure that if adjustments need to be made, that you let us know. But also just make sure that you are keeping good record of anything and everything that happened during these fires, because I think that's going to be so important when utilizing these programs. Another program that will hopefully be helpful to producers is the Emergency Conservation Program for fence losses. I know we lost a lot of fence during these fires, and we want to make sure that producers can get a little bit of assistance in that space, as well as ELAP, the Emergency Assistance for Livestock, which will cover some of the feed losses. So again, if there are parts of those programs or things that when you're working with your local FSA office that you're encountering, please reach out to our office. We want to be helpful here in DC.
Well, support for disaster relief programs has been a big part of NCBA's ask in this next Farm Bill. Tell us a little bit about some of the other NCBA Farm Bill priorities.
Those disaster assistance programs are so important, but so are those risk management programs that we know that producers are using more and more. And so we're going to continue to look at those programs under RMA, make sure that they're working. Again, if tweaks need to be made, this is the Farm Bill is definitely one of the avenues to do that. We also can work on some of these programs outside of a Farm Bill and work directly with USDA, which we have done in the past. Also, just keeping a close eye on the conservation title. We obviously have a lot of dollars from the IRA tied to climate smart ag. However, we're going to make sure that we take advantage of those dollars for our producers in the best possible way that benefits our producers, as well as our animal health priorities within the Farm Bill. In the 2018 Farm Bill, we were able to create the foot and mouth disease vaccine bank. We're going to continue to ask for a little bit more in that space. We know that dollars are hard to come by. We asked for $150 million a year for the life of the Farm Bill this time around, we're asking for $153 million a year, which is a slight increase to cover some more diagnostic test kits. And we feel like that is a reasonable amount to be asking for. This vaccine bank is absolutely a safety net for our producers, and one that we feel very strong about continuing to fund. And then we also have the other two legs of the lovingly called the three-legged stool, with the labs that do our very important diagnostic testing, as well as the NADPREP grants that have helped a lot of our states to better prepare for the outbreak of a foreign animal disease outbreak. And then, one other thing I'll mention is we don't need a livestock title. And then one more thing is that we want to make sure that we're protecting the beef checkoff and other checkoffs through this Farm Bill. We know that there will be attacks, and we are ready and prepared to fight off those attacks.
If you could speak a little bit more about the value of the vaccine bank and why it's so important to take steps to protect our industry from an outbreak of something like foot and mouth disease.
Absolutely. I think, one of the main talking points that we have about the vaccine bank is our industry wants to be best prepared, right? We look at the high path avian influenza outbreak, and unfortunately there's been $1 billion spent on indemnity from that outbreak. We are trying to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, spend a little bit of money up front for a safety net for protection so that we are not spending billions and billions of dollars and that the overall economy is not negatively impacted, which it would be in the case of an FMD outbreak that spread quickly that we did not get under control. And so I think, again, this is our industry saying, we don't usually come to a Farm Bill asking for a lot, but this vaccine bank makes sense, it's smart, and it is not if, but when we are hit with a foreign animal disease outbreak.
Well, I wanted to ask you about a new bill that Senator Rounds has introduced, the Livestock Indemnity Program Improvement Bill. Tell us a little bit more about what this bill does and why it's important.
So when it comes to the Livestock Indemnity Program, I think we need to make sure that it is up to date. And it's always great when we work with offices and they look directly at the NCBA policy book, which comes from our membership. And they take that language and they say, you know what, this sounds like a great idea. And so I'm not suggesting that that's what happened in this case, but it basically... we have policy that passed on LIP, and Senator Rounds has been gracious enough to support that through his recent legislation. Our language from our policy book says that LIP should reflect the fair market value of all classes of beef cattle and be updated, and that's simply what this bill does. It makes sure that we have more updates to the market value and the rates within LIP so that producers can get compensated appropriately.
Well, Allison, thank you so much for joining us and giving us an update today.
Thank you to the National Cattlemen's Beef Association for that report. In today's National Spotlight, there's progress in helping wild bees. Gary Crawford has more.
If this wild bumblebee that I recorded on my front porch here could speak to us, it might be saying,
we need habitat, we need to be protected, they need nutrition all through the year. We need lots and lots of different kinds of flowers. Lots of different pollinators need different ones.
And it might also tell us that we need it. This according to Dr. Cass Urban Mead. She's an expert with the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation. And a while back I had a chance to talk with her in Washington out at the Agriculture Department's People's Garden. She says our food supply depends on plant pollination, which is done by bees and many other insects.
At least 1 in 3 of our bites of food relies on pollinators. pollinators to some degree, and that's particularly true once you zoom in on your most nutritious and nutrient-dense foods, the nuts and fruits and vegetables, and then lots of other important crops and wild plants are highly dependent on pollinators.
And she says it's not just honeybees that do this work. In fact,
we actually have over 4,000 species of wild native bees who are not honeybees living. Many of them are solitary, some of them are shiny and green or blue, or your carpenter bee, your bumblebee, all of these beloved native pollinators.
But as you've probably heard, conditions may not be the greatest for some of these bees and other pollinators.
There's multiple stressors that are making life more difficult for a lot of our pollinators.
She says a changing climate isn't helping any, but the overall problem is basically the loss of natural habitat, as more wild space is being lost to development, and in many cases the wrong kind of development.
Making things monoculture lawns, spraying everything with insecticides maybe prophylactically rather than carefully as a response to a particular problem.
However, as much as we've talked about this here and the problems, Cass says no matter what you've heard,
there's absolutely progress being made
as more people become aware of the problem.
It's exciting to see more insects being considered in endangered species and protection laws. It's also just exciting to see how much the public and so many more people are really caring and asking for pollinator habitat to be included in a new park design, in their schools, in their towns.
And in their own home, lawns, and gardens.
There's no space that's too small. You can make a difference no matter how small your space is. It's not, a polar bear or a great wolf that needs huge numbers of acres. No matter whether you just have a small patio, a balcony, a patch of grass nearby, you can convert it into habitat and start to make that difference.
And next time, we're going to find out exactly what we homeowners or property owners can do to help out my friend here on my front porch. This is Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Don't forget, if you've missed any of our morning shows or if you simply need to catch the news at a different time, you can subscribe to our podcast and have statewide agriculture news at your convenience. All you have to do is search for the AgNet News Hour on your favorite podcast downloading app. That's AgNet News Hour, and it's available on both Apple and Android devices. Coming up in a few moments, we'll have today's This Land of Ours report, but first, more of the day's agriculture news. And with today's AgNet West headlines, here's AgNet West Farm News Director Brian German.
Citrus growers have an opportunity to enroll for assistance being made possible by a grant from the Healthy Soils Program. Administered by the California Citrus Quality Council in collaboration with the California Farm Bureau and Xerces Society, the project has been allocated $5 million to support citrus growers in adopting conservation practices. The program aims to enhance soil health, carbon sequestration, and pollinator protection. Between 20 and 45 projects will be funded over 3 years, with up to $200,000 per project available. The program prioritizes environmental stewardship, resilience to climate change, and meeting sustainable consumer demands. Eligible applicants must be citrus growers in specific California counties and commit to implementing conservation practices. The enrollment window is currently open, and more information is available under the Programs and Services tab at CaliforniaBountifulFoundation.com. Cargill has awarded the National FFA organization more than $3 million to help support the next generation of ag leaders. From 2023 to 2025, the grant will support various FFA programs and events, including sustainability initiatives and the Living to Serve program. The grant also backs the American FFA degree, the American Star Awards, and career exploration programs like Ag Explorer. During the National FFA Convention and Expo, the funding supports booths, the rodeo, and travel grants for career development event participants. In the first year, the grant facilitated nearly 78,000 hours of service projects and supported 619 FFA members in competitive events. Both parties anticipate further collaboration to enhance impact in the remaining 2 years of the grant, fostering leadership and promoting sustainability in agriculture. Several industry groups have issued support for the introduction of the Expanding Access to Local Foods Act in the U.S. Senate. The Eat Local Foods Act proposes a permanent program to sustain the USDA's Local Food Purchase Assistance Program, empowering states and tribal nations to strengthen regional food supply chains. It directs USDA to form cooperative agreements with states, tribes, and territories for purchasing food from local producers to distribute to vulnerable communities and provide technical assistance for growers. The bill includes funding for food safety planning, training, and upgrades, with subawards to nonprofits or food hubs. The Eat Local Foods Act proposes to institutionalize the LFPA, which strengthened local food systems, improved supply chain resilience, and aided underserved producers and communities when Congress allocated $900 million to the effort during the COVID-19 pandemic. There's reason for cautious optimism for California cotton moving forward. President and CEO of the California Cotton Ginners and Growers Association, Roger Isom, explained some of the markers for upward momentum for the industry.
Prices are decent. Obviously, there is fluctuation. I think the biggest concern is just movement. We've got to see the worldwide economy improve so we can actually start moving this product. And I'm starting to see signs of it, little indicators here and there. Weekly shipments, I know on Pima have increased a little bit. We've just got to see a few more changes out there. But I think, as time goes on, things will, they're always cyclical. So I think we'll start to see some of this move. And, again, we're growing almost all Pima out here, and I just think that the signs are there. There's not a lot of Pima out there. So I think, as it turns, it's going to improve.
The UC Davis Department of Viticulture and Enology Extension team will be on the road in Kern County next week. On-the-road programs are educational seminars that help the Department of Viticulture and Enology communicate with the California grape and wine industries by bringing faculty to different regions of the state. One of the seminars is scheduled to start at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, April 10th at Hodell's Country Dining in Bakersfield. Some of the topics of discussion will include high-resolution irrigation technology for increasing water use efficiency in vineyards, disease identification and tissue sampling, and improving berry firmness and color in red table grapes. Extension Specialist Matthew Fidelibus will be talking about macro and micronutrient budgets in table grapes, and there will also be a Department of Viticulture and Enology overview and extension discussion. More information about the seminar is available on the upcoming events page at agnetwest.com. I'm Brian German for AgNet West Radio Network.
What skills are currently needed in the ag workforce? That's coming up on This Line of Ours. U.S. employers reported challenges in finding suitable job candidates with work-ready skills to fill open roles in the agri-food industry. AgCareers.com surveyed those employers to gain deeper insights into the skills they seek and identify the most significant skill gaps in the workforce. Employers ranked problem-solving and decision-making as the most necessary skills for all employees, followed by organization and planning skills and teamwork. Problem-solving and decision-making were also identified as areas with the most significant gap for both current employees and new graduate hires. Only 18% of U.S. employers said that new graduate hires were adequately prepared with work-ready skills upon hire, whereas 76% said experienced new hires were equipped with those skills. Results indicate the biggest knowledge needs were in agronomy and precision agriculture and animal sciences. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Cindy Zimmerman.
I'm Deb Fisher, the senior senator from Nebraska.
Well, and you just spoke here to the American Coalition for Ethanol. And first of all, it's your second term. Why is ethanol so important to you?
Ethanol is obviously a big part of the economy of the state of Nebraska. We are I always say, the biggest producer of ethanol west of the Missouri River. I discount Iowa. But, and obviously for our ag economy, the agriculture in Nebraska is the economic engine. And as I mentioned in my remarks, to be able to have the benefit of ethanol to our energy security is also very, very important.
Now, your bill for year-round E15, you told the group here that you're hit a roadblock on that. Tell me a little bit more about that.
We've worked with Senator Carper on the bill. He is chair of the Environment and Public Works Committee. I consider him a friend. And he has a refinery in his state that he is trying to work with on this. But I think we need to be able to address some of his concerns and have more of folks on the other side of the aisle who are willing to step forward and talk to him about that as well, so that he understands how important an issue this is for so many of our communities, so many of our states. Doesn't matter if they're blue or if they're red states. This is a big deal to be able to have a year-round sale of E15.
As you mentioned, this has taken a very, very, very long time, and it's still not done yet. Why?
Oh, we're just going to keep going on it. We're going to keep going. As I said, this is a big part of the economy of my state. It is extremely important for ag producers. And it doesn't matter what state they live in. This is extremely important for ag producers, for rural communities, and for every state because of ag's impact on every single state's economy.
What about sustainable aviation fuel? I didn't talk much about that, and the GREET model that we're still waiting on to be able to take advantage of those tax credits in the IRA.
Yeah, we need to be able to have a model out there that's going to take into account foodstuffs as well. So that's what we're going to push on that. And then that's going to be another market that'll be available for ag.
Finally, the Farm Bill. You think we're going to have one this year?
I don't know. I don't know. We've run into some roadblocks on the Farm Bill as well. I want to see more farm in the Farm Bill, and we haven't reached that point yet in the committee.
Overall, what's your message to ethanol producers?
I would just say thank you. Thank you for what you do, for the benefits you provide for agriculture, for the benefits you provide for communities, for the growth that we see in jobs when we have ethanol plants in our states. So thank you to ethanol producers. We will keep working on this, and we gain more and more and more support every year.
Thank you very much, Senator, for being here for the ethanol producers and all the work you do for them.
Thank
all right.
you.
Here at the American Coalition for Ethanol's annual fly-in, I'm Cindy Zimmerman.
Gardening season is upon us, and Gary Crawford has some tips for those of us who are new to gardening.
Here's a song from that classic old musical, The Fantastics, with a couple of gardeners who sing.
Life is very if it's very vegetarian. A man who plants a garden is a very happy man.
Or woman, or child. We drag that old song out every so often when we see a resurgence of interest in gardening, and that's what's been happening over the last couple of years. If you're thinking about getting into gardening for the first time, stay tuned. We have some expert advice that could save you a lot of time, trouble, and frustration. It's coming up on not the frustration, the advice, on this edition of Agriculture USA. I'm Gary Crawford. Last spring, there was a huge uptick in sales of seeds and plants and garden supplies to first-time gardeners. This spring, that's sort of settled down, but still, lots of people for the first time ever are saying, "Can I make this garden? All it takes is a rake and a hoe and a piece of fertile ground." Well, it might take a little more than that, but if you are trying your hand at growing some vegetables for the first time, we do have some expert advice, which is get some expert advice.
Every state in the United States has a wonderful extension service, and my first bit of advice would be tell people to use it.
Particularly to find out what plants are the best for your area and when to plant them. This from Dennis Patton. He's a Kansas State University extension garden expert. He told us,
The internet is full of scary advice.
Oh, scary.
But if you go to your USDA extension service in your state or your county, you're going to get good research based, not some wives' tale or home remedy on gardening. So that's the first place to start, is with good, solid research-based information through your land-grant extension.
Now, Dennis Patton's advice for newbies?
Start simple. Start small. You're not trying to hoard food for the winter. You're just trying to supplement your diet during the summer.
Yes, some of us get a little overly enthused to end up with far more work than we planned on, plus more produce than we know what to do with. And along that same start simple theme, Dennis says maybe we shouldn't start off clearing a special section of the yard for the garden or building raised beds and all of that. Instead, Dennis says just incorporate your vegetable plants
into your traditional landscape. So instead of putting in a six-pack of petunias in the spring, put in some green beans. Or take advantage of a spot where an overgrown shrub was. Take it out and put your tomato plants in there. And so do this kind of idea of incorporating the vegetables into your existing space until you know whether or not you're going to love it.
Also, remember that like any hobby that we take up for the first time, it can take more time than we might think. And with many of us now back at the workplace, we may not have the time to work a big garden. So just planting some vegetables in the normal landscape is a good idea.
The other thing that's really been popular, and I've gotten more questions on this year, is growing vegetables in containers on your decks, patios, and you can certainly grow a lot of veggies in various containers.
Okay, now earlier you heard Dennis mention tomatoes, so let's roll out this timeless 1983 song from Guy Clark.
Homegrown tomatoes, homegrown tomatoes. What'd life be without homegrown tomatoes?
Well, I have never had much luck with homegrown tomatoes.
Tomatoes, they're not that difficult to grow once we just give them some basic requirements or basic needs.
First, Dennis, what's the biggest mistake that people make when trying to grow tomatoes?
The biggest mistake people make is planting them too early when the soils are still too cold and there's a chance of a frost, and then the plant just sits there and it kind of gets stunted.
Dennis, he mentioned providing our tomatoes with their basic needs. One of those needs is at least 6 hours a day of direct sun.
And a lot of neighborhoods that have mature trees or people that live in ever-increasing, townhomes, apartments sometimes struggle to find that sunlight. Second is they're going to need good drainage. So we try to avoid spots that tend to hold water, stay wet for a longer period after rain. And then we also like to have those vegetable gardens somewhat near to a water source, because in most parts of our country, we're going to have to do some supplemental watering during the summer months.
And that brings up the third mistake many of us make with our
Homegrown tomatoes.
and that is overwatering in combination with having the plants in soils or pots that don't drain well. Most experts say only water when the soil feels dry below the 1-inch level. But watering advice varies depending on where you live, what variety you're trying to grow, what kind of soil you're using. But for best results, Dennis Patton again says check with your local Ag Extension Service. They've got the information to help you with those homegrown tomatoes. This has been Agriculture USA. I'm Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Here's an excerpt from an episode of the Voices of the Valley podcast that features a conversation highlighting some of the most common misconceptions in agriculture.
Hi, I'm Julia. Thank you for joining us for this portion of Voices of the Valley. I'm joined here by Celeste. Celeste, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, my name is Celeste Alonzo. I work my family farm, Junior Enterprises, in Coachella, California. I am the COO of the operation, and I currently work alongside my younger brother and my dad.
Myth number 1, that working conditions in the field are unsafe and that workers are treated poorly. How would you address this myth?
You know, it really upsets me when people say that, because one thing my dad has instilled in my brothers and I is respecting your workforce, because he's like, if you respect them, you're pretty much giving them, they're in charge of harvesting your crop. So if you treat them right, they will take care of you. And that's something that he's instilled in us. And well, we have our farm workers that do our year-round ground prep work, and we have safety trainings every month. We take care of them as their family. We treat our 15 people like family. And then we have our harvest workers. And I know that's where a lot of the issues stem from, is harvest. People just think farm workers and harvest. And I think one of the biggest things we need to separate is that growers hire farm labor contractors. And I know farmers pretty much have to be on top of the farm labor contractors, but at the end of the day, when it comes to safety, it's on the farm labor contractors. And we make an effort to go out to the fields. Well, we do during harvest. We go out and make sure that everything's right. We don't stay the whole time, but we make sure, for example, like our corn harvest, it's at night. Every worker needs to have a reflective jacket. You're at night, you don't want to get run over or hit by a tractor or anything like that. But in the end of the day, we put a lot of the trust in farm labor contractor, and we've had to change farm labor contractors because we've seen some that don't have the safety standards that we wish they would have. So we have to switch. And for example, for Thanksgiving, the California Farm Worker Foundation gave us food to give to all our harvest workers. And on top of that, my dad has always given our harvest workers $20 gift cards for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And for me, I think that's something beautiful, because not only do they see that we care, but it's something that we could do for them and their families, especially during the holidays. So for harvest workers, there's a lot of pre-inspections that go into place as far as, and then as well as like during harvest inspections, we need to have the basics, obviously shade, water, and porta potties. And depending on the size of the crew, that depends on the amount of shades we take out, porta potties, and things like that. Breaks are also very important. That's one thing that we are sticklers with the FLCs. They need to have their breaks, because that is one thing we've had issues in the past where some workers don't want to take a break, and then it comes back and backfires on us because we're not giving them the appropriate time off or break time. So we're always super sure that they're getting their break times and their lunch breaks as well, and they're all taking them. That's part of it. So
will you touch on that a bit more, how you guys have employees who have been with the company for so long, and just touch on that relationship? And there's a misconception that field workers are not treated right compared to you guys having workers that have been here for so long.
Yeah, my dad came to the desert like in the 1980s, and he started his own business in 2008, and he still had connections from when he first started, and his best friends. He was 28 when he got here, and he's had people working with him, Prospero being one of them, who's been by his side, his right-hand man, since he started. And I don't think the company would be where we at if we didn't have these loyal employees who help us so much. Like I said, they're family to us. So many of them, I think there's 3 of them that have known me since we were babies, and to be able to work alongside them now, and my brothers work with them, like, it's a blessing. To me, it's a blessing because we're family.
Myth number 2, that adding machines into the field leaves farm laborers out of work.
As far as machinery in the fields, here in the desert, we haven't really fully grasped onto that yet, just because we don't have that much of a labor issue being so close to the border. But I could see why so many companies in Salinas and Northern California are using them, just because of the shortage or also the cost of getting labor out there. I know H-2A is becoming more difficult, but as far here in the desert, we haven't incorporated too much, but it's getting to the point where we have to, just because, yeah, we are getting some people to do the work, but we can get the bodies, but they don't necessarily know how to do the job, if that makes sense. So for example, we had a crew during our pepper harvest who they gave us the bodies, but they didn't know how to harvest the pepper. So that's issues like that. Like, yes, we can get the people, but can they do the job, sort of thing. So that's actually an issue that we are coming up that is arising here in the desert. But as far as machinery for us, I know my brother's working on his drone application. He just got certified to DPR to do drone spraying. And it's an exciting project for us and the company, just because it's new technology, something new, and hopefully can help lower our cost and make it more in-house, because our corn spraying does have to be done through a third party. So I think technology in ag is a good way to bring in the younger generation into agriculture. You know, so many kids nowadays, they're just technology. So to be able to be like, hey, you can work on a field and work with all this cool machinery and technology, I think it'd be something cool. I mean, what college kid wouldn't want to come out and like use a drone and be spraying corn, right? I think that's a good benefit with technology being introduced to agriculture, is bringing in that new generation to come work into ag. And as far as like crops that are machine harvested, you're right. They are, for example, we do potatoes that obviously cannot be done by farm workers, so it's totally done by machine. Carrots here in the desert as well, all done by machine. We did green beans machine too this season. We tried that out actually. But sometimes, you know, it's like trying to figure it out, like which one will get the most profit out of it. We had troubles with the machine this year with the green bean machine, but we had to bring in a crew with people. But it's, you know, learning. I've struggled incorporating technology to our company, just because my dad, super old school traditional. I mean, I wish we could do everything digital, but my dad likes to have a paper trail. So I think my younger brother and I coming in and taking over, we definitely see more technology being used in the near future.
And then are there any crops for you guys that the skill is just so particular that it's more beneficial for you to have human laborers?
Oh, yes, 100%. With the corn, since we don't have a pack house, we have people harvesting, and they're checking the size with their hand to make sure that the corn is up to size, to make sure that that's something that we can harvest. We had a crew come in that wasn't that skilled in corn, and they were packing, you know, half 6-inch, 3-inch little corns into the boxes. So definitely need to have skilled labor when it comes to like corn or bell peppers as well, because for our bell peppers we do anywhere from 3 to 4 passes, and there's a specific way in pulling the pepper from the plant so you don't damage the plant, and you definitely need to have a crew that knows how to harvest peppers to be able to get the best production.
That again from Voices of the Valley. You are listening to the AgNet News Hour. Now for more news. There are more risk management tools for specialty crop and small-size farmers. Rod Bain has details.
Over the past 2 years, USDA's Risk Management Agency has conducted education for small-size farmers and specialty crop producers on 2 specific crop insurance products tailored to their operation.
Whole farm revenue.
And
the microfarm.
Risk Management Agency Administrator Marcia Bunger describes how these policies work, starting with whole farm revenue protection.
WFRP provides a risk management safety net for all commodities on the farm under one insurance policy. What's been more traditional is that policies have covered a single crop. This is the whole farm.
While microfarm policies resemble whole farm revenue coverage. However,
that particular policy is even less paperwork intensive, and it's tailored for small operations, those specialty crops, those farm side stands that are growing vegetables, fruits, that kind of thing.
Among the feedback that the RMA administrator and others within the federal crop insurance system have received over the past 2 years from eligible producers pertain to their local crop insurance agent and their connection to whole farm revenue protection and microfarm policies.
The feedback then we got is, well, where do I find one of these agents?
RMA has an agent locator service available at their website, www.rma.usda.gov. And based on the feedback,
we've updated that agent locator site with a new searchable directory to help those individuals looking for a whole farm, microfarm specialty agent, somebody that has been selling, is experienced, knowledgeable about this particular product.
The administrator notes RMA conducted mapping to better understand the degree of crop insurance agents providing whole farm revenue protection.
And what we learned is that when agents responded with that, I would like to be identified as being a WFRP whole farm agent. We do have availability for agents to sell and service policies in all 50 states. The number, I think, right now is at a little over 1,100 agents across the country that self-identified.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
The U.S. is seeing record high placements into cattle feedlots. Here's Gary Crawford.
A record high number of cattle placed into feedlots in February. The USDA reporting placements at about 1.9 million head, up 10% from February a year ago. USDA livestock analyst Mike McConnell says most folks were not expecting that large of an increase, but consider this.
In January, we actually had a relatively low placement number. That was due to the winter storms that we had across the Midwest that came in early January, which delayed some of those placements. So some of the increase that we saw in placements during February was the fact that we were making up for some of the weather incidents that occurred during January.
Putting feedlot placements up at historical levels. Also, according to Mike,
prices for feeder cattle are also very strong. They're also at historic levels.
During February at Oklahoma City, prices for 750 to 800 pound cattle averaging $241 a hundredweight. It was only $184 during February last year. So obviously,
there's a lot of opportunity for cow-calf operators to, market their feeder cattle and, get a good return on those animals that they're taking off pasture or taking off winter wheat pasture and placing them into feedlots. Now there's good returns for it. As there's also still relatively robust demand for beef in the country.
But will consumer demand go down as beef prices continue to go up?
We're at the point in the season now where we're beginning to transition on the beef demand side towards the summer grilling season. So, a lot about what we see happening in the cattle and beef markets in the next couple weeks and months is largely going to be predicated on how consumers respond and what kind of beef demand we get and how that works its way back through the system. So, so I think that's what we'll be paying attention to the next couple of weeks and months as we prepare our forecast, and I imagine the market is going to be doing the same.
Mike is pretty sure about one forecast, and that is for continued contraction of the beef herd as producers keep selling heifers instead of holding on to them for breeding. And so
it's probably going to be at least another year or two down the line before we see the numbers start to indicate expansion.
This is Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
That's today's top agriculture news. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West online at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find our broadcast team of Brian German and Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.